Nestled in the rugged embrace of Montana's mountains, where the earth stretched wide under a boundless sky, Ironwood Valley lay quiet, its fields kissed by frost and bathed in the soft amber of dawn. To the casual eye, it was a place of timeless simplicity. Farmers tending crops, ranchers herding cattle, a community woven into the fabric of the land. But beneath this serene facade, a storm was gathering. The Mexican cartel, a sprawling empire of violence and greed, had cast its shadow northward, its ruthless tendrils reaching for the valley's fertile soil. Their latest target, the isolated farm of Wade Thorne, a man they dismissed as an aging rancher too stubborn to bend. They were about to learn how fatally they'd misjudged him. Wade Thorne, 65, carried the weight of decades in his broad shoulders, but his stride remained that of a predator, fluid, deliberate, honed by years of shadow wars. For 30 years, he'd been the most lethal Delta Force commander in US military history, known only as Phantom, a specter who struck with surgical precision and vanished without a whisper. Now, retired to the land his grandfather had tamed, he lived a life of quiet solitude, tending crops and mending fences. But the instincts that had kept him alive through countless classified missions never dulled. When the cartel set its sights on his farm, they didn't just threaten his home, they awakened a legend. The morning began like any other, with frost crunching under Wade's boots as he walked his property line, his German shepherd Atlas trotting at his side. The air was crisp, the sky streaked with gold and purple as the sun crested the peaks. Atlas's ears twitched, his amber eyes scanning the horizon, a mirror to Wade's own vigilance. At the edge of his field, near the weathered fence that marked his boundary, Wade paused. Fresh tire tracks scarred the mud, deep, wide, made by something heavier than the pickups of local ranchers. He knelt, tracing the grooves with calloused fingers, his mind already sifting possibilities. Atlas growled low, hackles rising, confirming what Wade suspected. These weren't friendly visitors. A familiar rumble broke the silence. Sarah Bennett's battered pickup rattling up the dirt track. She was his closest neighbor, a tough woman in her 50s who'd inherited her family's ranch and ran it with grit and grace. Today, her face was etched with worry as she leaned out the window. "Wade, you hear about the Hendersons?" Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the calm she usually wore like armor. "They're gone. Packed up and left last night, no warning, no goodbye. This morning I drove by their place. Saw men there, black SUVs, strangers who don't belong in this valley." Wade straightened, brushing mud from his jeans, his expression unreadable, but his mind racing. "Cartel," he said, the word dropping like a stone. "They've been creeping north from the border, taking farms, buying what they can, strong-arming the rest." Sarah's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "They haven't come to me yet, but Miller's place went last week. Mysterious buyers, cash offers too big to turn down. Wade, these aren't your average thugs. They've got money, organization, firepower. The sheriff's out of his depth. Hell, nobody's standing up to them." Wade rested a hand on her truck, his voice steady. "Don't worry about me, Sarah. I've faced worse than this. You keep your eyes open. They'll be knocking on your door soon." She nodded, her jaw tight, and drove off, leaving a trail of dust that mingled with the morning mist. Wade whistled for Atlas and headed toward the barn, his steps purposeful. Inside, beneath a layer of hay bales and rusted tools, he lifted a false floorboard to reveal a hidden cellar, a precaution he'd installed when he first bought the land. His old Delta teammates had teased him for it, calling it paranoia. Wade called it survival. The space gleamed with military precision, rifles, grenades, encrypted comms gear, night vision scopes, all pristine, waiting for a day he'd hoped would never come. His phone buzzed, a text from an old law enforcement contact. Cartels moving fast. 7 properties taken in the last month. Watch your back. He climbed to the loft and peered through a slit in the barn wall. 3 black SUVs rolled slowly past his gate, their tinted windows reflecting the rising sun. Reconnaissance, marking their prey. Wade's lips curved into a faint, cold smile. They don't know who they're dealing with. By midday, the SUVs returned, this time stopping at his gate. 5 men stepped out, their movements deliberate, their presence jarring against the valley's rustic calm. Leading them was Felix Reyes, a man in his 40s with slicked-back hair and polished boots that screamed city money. His smile was practiced, professional, but his eyes were winter steel, predatory, unyielding. "Mr. Thorne," he called, striding forward with an outstretched hand. "Beautiful property you've got here." Wade met him halfway, shaking the offered hand, noting the overly firm grip, a juvenile attempt at dominance. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone friendly but his senses razor-sharp. 2 men drifted toward the barn, their casual stroll a poor disguise for intent. Another lingered by the gate, one hand tucked beneath his jacket. Radio or weapon, Wade couldn't tell yet. Military training, but careless. "We represent an investment group," Felix said, gesturing expansively toward the valley. "We've been acquiring properties around here, expanding operations. Your land has certain features that interest us. We're prepared to offer $3 million cash, more than generous for a ranch this size." Wade leaned against a fence post, the picture of ease, though his mind was mapping fields of fire, noting holster bulges, clocking their stances. At least 3 were ex-military. The others were muscle, used to intimidating civilians. "Not interested," he said simply. "This land's been in my family too long." Felix's smile tightened, a crack in his polished veneer. "Perhaps I wasn't clear. This is significantly above market value. $3 million for a place like this is a once-in-a-lifetime deal. The valley's changing, Mr. Thorne. Progress, you might say. You can be part of it and profit, or..." He trailed off as the 2 men near the barn edged closer, peering through the slats. "Sounds like a threat," Wade said, letting a hint of steel creep into his voice. Felix flinched when Wade used his name, a detail he hadn't offered, but recovered quickly. "Just stating facts. The valley's shifting. Fighting it would be unwise. You've got 24 hours to think it over. After that, the offer's less appealing." As Felix turned to leave, he paused, eyeing Atlas, who stood rigid, teeth bared. "Beautiful dog. German Shepherd, right? Be a shame if something happened to him." Atlas's growl deepened, but Wade's gentle touch kept him still. "That'd be a very serious mistake," Wade said, his voice low, carrying the weight of 3 decades of combat. Felix hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, the first sign he'd misread his target, then retreated with his men, their SUVs kicking up gravel as they departed. Wade didn't waste time. Inside the house, he activated his true security system, cameras concealed in tree branches, motion sensors lining the perimeter, all feeding into a basement command center he'd built years ago, a relic of a life spent planning for worst-case scenarios. He spread detailed maps across his desk. His farm sat at a strategic nexus, controlling the main road into the valley and overlooking 3 approach routes. No wonder they wanted it. It was perfect for their drug routes. Isolated, defensible, a natural hub. He dialed old teammates, men who'd bled beside him in places that didn't exist on official maps. "Knox, it's Phantom," he said when the line connected. "Time to cash in that favor. Cartel's moving into my valley, taking farms. They're coming for mine next. I need the team." Knox the sniper chuckled, his voice rough as gravel. "Been a while, Wade. How bad is it?" "Bad enough. They'll hit tonight or tomorrow. One last mission. Bring the crew." "On it. We're not as young as we used to be, you know." Wade grinned grimly. "Neither are they." By late afternoon, 4 arrived, their vehicles rolling in under the cover of dusk. Knox stepped out first, his custom rifle case slung over his shoulder like an extension of himself. Cyrus followed, hauling crates of explosives disguised as construction gear. Zane arrived with a laptop and comms equipment that could crack military encryption, and Nash brought a medical kit upgraded from their war days. They'd faced warlords, terrorists, entire armies. A cartel wouldn't faze them. Wade gathered them in the barn, spreading the map. They've taken 7 farms in a month, turning them into distribution hubs. My land's the key, controls access, gives them eyes on the valley. They're systematic, well-funded, and they'll come in force. Knox studied the terrain, his sniper's eye picking out vantage points. Natural bottleneck here, high ground there, perfect kill zones. We can funnel them right where we want. Cyrus cracked his knuckles, grinning. Been itching to blow something up. I've got charges that'll flip their trucks like toys. Zane tapped his laptop. Intercepted their chatter. They're sloppy with security. Arrogant. That's our edge. Nash unpacked his kit, methodical as ever. How many we expecting? Main force around 30, Wade said, pointing to marked spots. 2 teams, muscle for intimidation, pros for the real fight. They'll bring heavy weapons, maybe air support. Just like old times, Knox said, his voice gruff but warm. Except no government backup. Government just slows us down, Cyrus shot back, already eyeing the barn's structure for traps. Wade walked the property as the sun dipped below the horizon, seeing it not as a farmer, but as a battlefield commander. Every hill, every tree line, every ditch, it was a canvas for war, and he'd painted with precision. Midnight arrived under a silver moon, the valley silent save for the hum of engines echoing in the distance. Wade watched through night vision scopes as 20 cartel vehicles approached, splitting into 3 units, a main force barreling up the central road, 2 smaller teams flanking wide. Their movements were crisp, ex-Mexican special forces armed with machine guns and RPGs, radiating overconfidence. Let them get comfortable, Wade ordered over encrypted comms. Spring it on my mark. The vanguard rolled past the outer perimeter, oblivious to the web they'd entered. Felix's voice crackled over their open channel. Spread out, surround the place. No one escapes. Now, Wade said. Cyrus detonated the first series of charges, buried mines that erupted beneath the lead vehicles, sending them skyward in a shower of fire and metal. Knox opened fire from his elevated nest, 2 precise shots dropping cartel soldiers before they could react. The night exploded into chaos. What the hell is this? A panicked voice screamed over their radio. Felix dove for cover, shouting, They're professionals! Fall back to the vehicles! Reform! Too late, Wade whispered, triggering a second wave of charges that severed their retreat. Knox's rifle cracked again, neutralizing a technical's gunner, while Cyrus launched a rocket that flipped another vehicle in a fireball, moves they'd perfected in Damascus years ago. Wade moved like a phantom through the dark, his suppressed rifle silencing threats with lethal efficiency. Felix staggered to his feet, yelling into the void, Who are you? What kind of farmer fights like this? The kind you shouldn't have crossed, Wade replied, his voice seeming to come from everywhere. Felix lunged, pistol drawn, but Wade disarmed him with a swift strike and dropped him unconscious with a blow to the temple. The remaining dozen surrendered, hands raised, faces pale with shock. Zane's voice cut through the comms. First wave down, but there's more. Second force, 40 strong, heavy weapons, led by El Fantasma. ETA 20 minutes. Felix, stirring as Nash zip-tied him, smirked through a bloody lip. You're dead. El Fantasma doesn't leave witnesses. He'll burn this valley to ash. Wade crouched beside him, unfazed. Met plenty like him. They all think they're untouchable, until they're not. The second wave hit like a thunderstorm, their approach disciplined and relentless. 40 men, ex-Colombian special forces, fanned out with military precision, backed by a helicopter that swept in low, its spotlight carving through the darkness. Machine gun fire raked the farm's outer defenses, and RPGs streaked toward the barn, testing Wade's preparations. "Cyrus," Wade said calmly, "now." A custom flashbang designed for aircraft detonated with a blinding pulse, disorienting the chopper's pilot. The craft veered wildly as Knox's rifle barked, shattering the spotlight and disabling the door gunner's minigun with 2 pinpoint shots. "Land or crash," Wade broadcast to the pilot. Wisdom prevailed. The helicopter retreated into the night. On the ground, El Fantasma's voice boomed over their comms. "Push forward. They're just 5 men. We have the numbers." His troops advanced, leapfrogging between cover, their training evident in every move. But Wade had planned for this. Cyrus triggered directional mines, not to kill, but to herd, forcing the enemy into interlocking fields of fire. Knox picked off key targets with surgical accuracy, while Nash's suppressed MP5 dropped flankers before they could regroup. Wade moved through the chaos like a wraith, years of combat guiding his steps. 2 cartel soldiers setting up a machine gun nest never saw him coming. One fell to a throat strike, the other to a precise takedown. "Who are these bastards?" a panicked soldier screamed. "They're everywhere." El Fantasma rallied his men behind burning wreckage, adapting despite the ambush. "Form a base of fire. Give the reinforcements space," he ordered, his voice steady but strained. "Time to end this," Wade said. Cyrus hit their rally point with a chain of explosions. Bright magnesium flares that blinded and disoriented, not destroyed. Knox and Nash capitalized, disabling rather than killing, leaving the cartel's elite scattered and broken. Wade closed in on El Fantasma, who fled with 2 guards through the smoke. The cartel boss moved well, clearly a fighter, not just a commander, but Wade was faster. "Thought I was just a farmer," he said, stepping from the shadows, rifle trained. El Fantasma drew a pistol in a blur, but Wade's shot knocked it away, a second dropping his guards. A final bullet to the shoulder brought the kingpin down, his face twisting in shock and pain. As dawn crept over the mountains, the cartel launched a desperate final assault. 30 more men, their best contractors, aiming to overwhelm with sheer force. Wade's team was ready, but the true turning point came from an unexpected source: the valley itself. Sarah's voice crackled over a civilian radio. "Wade, we're in. They're not taking our home." Across Ironwood, farmers flipped on floodlights, blinding night vision scopes. Ranchers released cattle into paths, turning firm ground to chaos. Sprinkler systems activated, miring armored vehicles in mud. Shopkeepers and families stepped onto porches, phones recording every move. Calls flooded the sheriff's line. "Armed intruders, send help." The cartel's elite faltered, their military training useless against this organic resistance. "They're not soldiers," a contractor barked over comms. "What the hell is this?" "It's a community," Wade replied over their hacked channel. "You picked the wrong fight." The invaders retreated in disarray, only to find roads blocked by routine logging trucks and construction crews. Coordinated by residents who'd listened to Wade's quiet lessons over coffee and barn talks. Sheriff Cooper's tactical units rolled in, backed by FBI teams alerted by Nash's planted intel. Caught between civilian witnesses and law enforcement, the cartel force crumbled. 37 captured, alive but broken. El Fantasma, zip-tied beside Felix, glared up at Wade as medics tended his shoulder. "Who are you, really?" he rasped, voice a mix of fear and awe. "Just a farmer protecting his land," Wade said, his tone even. "But before that, I was the ghost who hunted men far worse than you. Remember that." Sunrise painted the valley in hues of gold and purple, revealing a farm scarred but unbowed. Burned vehicles smoldered, bullet holes pocked the barn, Yet its reinforced frame, built with Wade's foresight, stood firm. The 37 captives sat in groups, their wounds non-lethal, a testament to the team's precision. Sheriff Cooper arrived with his convoy, stepping onto the scene with wide eyes and a slack jaw. "Jesus, Wade," he breathed, surveying the wreckage, disabled technicals, craters from controlled blasts, zip-tied soldiers. "We got reports of explosions, gunfire. What happened here?" "Uninvited guests," Wade said, sipping coffee on his porch. "They didn't take no for an answer." Cooper walked the perimeter, taking in the surgical damage, the captured men in tactical gear, Mexican and Colombian ex-special forces, high-end weapons, IDs linking them to a regional cartel network. "This wasn't a brawl," he said half to himself. "This was something else." "They came for my farm," Wade replied, shrugging. "Found more than they bargained for. Your FBI friends will want to look at this bunch. Part of that group terrorizing the valley you couldn't pin down." Cooper's deputy approached, holding a stack of papers from the barn, planted intel Zane had left tying the cartel to local crimes. "Found this in there," he said, "enough to unravel their whole operation." Nash stepped forward, playing his medic role. "Got wounded here, Sheriff. Nothing critical. They'll need a hospital." Cooper nodded, radioing for ambulances, his deputies processing the scene with a mix of duty and disbelief. Every captive bore precise injuries, knees, shoulders, hands, disabling but not fatal. "Your guests have been busy," Cooper said, examining a confiscated rifle. "This is military-grade stuff, bigger than we thought." "Check the barn," Wade suggested. "Might find more to help your investigations." As law enforcement swarmed, Wade's team faded into the background, Knox and Cyrus slipping into the tree line, Zane wiping sensitive data, Nash tending prisoners. Wade handled the locals alone, his cover intact. FBI agents arrived, led by Special Agent Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in tactical gear. "Mr. Thorne," she said, badge gleaming, "we'll need a statement." "Simple story," Wade replied. "They tried to take my farm. I defended it." Martinez scanned the battlefield. Consistent, non-lethal wounds, actionable intel handed over like a gift. "Quite a night's work for one farmer," she said, eyebrow raised. "Grew up hunting," Wade shrugged. "Got lucky." She didn't buy it, but didn't push. "We've been after these guys for months. Couldn't touch them. One night, you take down their assault force and give us a case on a platter. Lucky indeed." "Take your time with the scene," Wade said. "Watch the north field. Unstable ground after all this." Martinez nodded, catching the unspoken warning. Some secrets stayed buried. By afternoon, the law enforcement presence dwindled to FBI evidence teams cataloging the carnage. Wade's farm bore battle scars, scorched earth, bullet-riddled walls, but to his trained eye, it told a story of control, not chaos. Knox's voice crackled over a secure channel. "They didn't find anything we didn't want them to." Zane reported from his hidden post. "Cartel chat has gone quiet, but police bands are buzzing. They're hitting cartel properties valley-wide. Our friends weren't the only ones caught." Cyrus emerged from the woods, dusting off his hands. "Cleaned up the last surprises. Ground's clear, though I'd wait to plant the south field." Nash joined them, medical kit packed. "Final count, 37 captured, all non-lethal. Precise even for us." "They expected farmers," Wade said, watching the last FBI vehicle vanish down the road. "Found professionals." Sarah's truck rolled up, her eyes sharp as she climbed out. "Town's buzzing, Wade. They're saying you fought off the cartel single-handed." He smiled faintly. "Stories grow. Just defended my land." "Don't play coy," she said, stepping closer. "I heard the blasts, the gunfire. My brother's with the state tactical team. He called it military-grade resistance. What really happened?" Wade poured her coffee inside. The bullet holes in his walls a silent testament. Sometimes farmers know more than folks expect. She studied the damage, then him. They're pulling out. Not just here across the valley. Running scared. This wasn't just about your farm, was it? Let's say some people needed a lesson, Wade replied. Not all land's worth taking. Knox's voice whispered in his earpiece. Black SUV approaching. Government plates. Langley's curious. Time to go, Sarah, Wade said gently. More visitors, fewer witnesses, easier talks. After she left, a CIA operative named Phillips arrived. Smooth, professional, probing. Quite an operation, he said, declining coffee. Reminds me of a classified file. Kandahar, a team that made problems vanish without evidence. Interesting read, Wade said neutrally. Thing is, Phillips continued, that team doesn't exist officially. Neither does this. Well, not how the locals see it. Just checking we're on the same page. Oh, and Colonel Hayes says your perimeter's straight out of Serbia. Wade's face stayed stone, but inside he smiled. Old debts repaid, favors called in. The valley was safer for it. That evening, the team regrouped in the barn, its blast marks a badge of honor. Place needs rebuilding, Cyrus noted. I've got ideas, better defenses. Cartels running, Zane added, but they might regroup. Worth staying vigilant. Knox cleaned his rifle. Thinking of retiring here anyway. Good ranges. Clinic could use me, Nash mused. Local doc's ancient. Wade looked at them. Men who'd crossed the globe at his call. You don't have to stay. We spend our lives fighting far-off wars, Knox said. Time to defend something closer. The decision settled wordlessly. The valley hadn't just won freedom, it had gained guardians with skills no cartel could match. What about El Fantasma? Cyrus asked. He'll talk, Wade shrugged. By then, his info's obsolete. Who'd believe a cartel boss claiming retired Delta operators took him down? Zane checked his phone. Word spreading. 3 cartels pulled back from nearby counties. They're calling this El Valle de los Fantasmas, Valley of Ghosts. Let them believe in spirits, Wade said. The truth's more dangerous. As night fell, Wade walked his land, Atlas at his side. The battle scars would fade, but the valley had changed, marked not as prey, but as a place where shadows fought back with precision and heart. Weeks later, subtle shifts rippled through Ironwood. Knox bought the Henderson place, turning it into a shooting range that doubled as a lookout. Nash opened a clinic, his combat medic skills serving rural needs while screening for threats. Cyrus fortified farms under the guise of repairs, and Zane wove a surveillance net masked as ham radio hobbyism. The community adapted too. Farmers trained with Knox, not as soldiers, but as protectors, their rifles steady under his gruff tutelage. Sarah became their eyes, spotting a cartel scout one evening and alerting Cyrus, who handled it discreetly. Valley's organizing, she told Wade over coffee. Thanks to you, we're watching out for each other. Land's worth protecting, he said, knowing it ran deeper. A network of vigilance, invisible yet ironclad. One quiet Tuesday, the first test came. 3 unmarked SUVs prowled the back roads, photographing properties. Tommy, a rancher's grandson trained by Knox, texted an alert. Farmers worked their fields, noting details. Sarah's dashcam captured plates. The intruders met Bill Henderson and his crew, ranchers casually blocking the road, spinning tales of contaminated soil and EPA woes. The scouts left, rattled by a 3-headed calf yarn, never suspecting the coordinated eyes tracking them. They'll write us off, Nash said later, reviewing footage. No military, just bad land. Wade nodded. Best defense isn't a fight, it's convincing them there's nothing to take. Rumors swelled in criminal circles. Scouts went blind driving Ironwood, crops withered under ghostly curses. Sheriff Cooper visited, troubled. DEA's asking why crimes vanished here. They think it's radioactive or something. Environmental stories, Wade said, tinkering with a tractor. Bad soil, you know. Cooper sighed. I've seen coordinated ops in 30 years of law. This ain't luck. Those hunting accidents, keeping scouts away, not accidents. Valley's quiet now, Wade replied. That's what matters. Sarah arrived, grinning. Community watch meeting tonight, official cover. Cooper's buying in. At the meeting, Wade spoke of awareness. Knox taught radio basics, words laced with double meaning for those in the know. FBI agents scribbled. DEA analysts nodded, seeing a well-run civilian effort, not the deeper truth. Outside, the valley deflected another probe. Colombian scouts escorted out by routine patrols, their every move logged. They think we're sanctioned, Sarah reported. Some Black Ops front. Let them, Wade said. The real strength's hidden in plain sight. Months later, 3 cartels, Mexican, Colombian, Russian, pooled resources, sending elite contractors at midnight. They expected retired operators. They got a valley alive with resistance. Farmers jammed comms with chatter, blinded scopes with lights, mired paths with cattle and mud. Civilians filmed, police closed in, no shots fired, yet the enemy broke. They thought they'd cracked us, Knox said, watching the sunrise. Found something bigger. Wade stood on his porch, coffee in hand, Atlas at his feet. We didn't turn them into soldiers, we taught them to be a community. The Valley of Ghosts wasn't a myth. It was a truth too vast for cartels to grasp. A land defended not just by phantoms, but by every soul who called it home.